She was invisible to them. The woman in gray coveralls who mopped their floors, emptied their trash, and disappeared into the background of military life. When Admiral Thorndyke's polished boots splashed through her fresh work, the laughter that followed wasn't new. She'd heard it before. The mockery, the dismissal, but they never noticed how she moved with strange precision, or how her eyes assessed exits before entering rooms. They never looked closely enough to see what was hidden beneath her sleeve. Until today. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you've ever respected someone others overlooked, this story might touch your heart. Subscribe if you believe in honoring the invisible heroes among us. The cold fluorescent lights flickered on, one by one, chasing shadows from the corners of Hangar 7. Seraph Voss arrived before anyone else, as she did every morning, slipping through the side entrance with her cleaning cart. At 47, she moved with the efficient precision of someone who had been mapping her daily route for years, her weathered hands gripping the handle of her cart, gray hair pulled back in a tight, practical bun. The name patch on her blue maintenance coveralls had faded beyond recognition. Threads loosened at the edges as though the identity it once carried had been deliberately worn away. She preferred it that way. Names invited questions. Questions led to histories. And history was exactly what Seraph had come to Naval Base Anacostia Bowling to escape. She began her routine at the far western corner, methodically filling her bucket with the precise ratio of cleaning solution, neither too strong nor too diluted. The hangar would soon fill with officers and engineers preparing for Admiral Thorndyke's first inspection since taking command of the Special Warfare Development Group. But for now, the vast space belonged to her, the quiet broken only by the squeak of her mop against the concrete floor. There was comfort in the repetitive motion. Forward, back, twist, ring, forward again. A rhythm as familiar as breathing, requiring no thought, leaving her mind free to count exits, catalog faces, assess threats. Old habits that refused to die. The massive hangar doors groaned open at exactly 600, admitting the first wave of personnel. Junior officers in pressed uniforms clutching tablets, maintenance crews rolling out equipment, mechanics beginning pre-flight checks on the transport helicopters. The space quickly transformed from empty cavern to bustling command center. Not one person acknowledged Seraph's presence. When they needed to cross her freshly mopped sections, they walked right through without hesitation, tracking boot prints across the wet surface. She would simply circle back, remopping what had been soiled, saying nothing. To them, she was furniture, background, a service functioning without a person attached to it. Lieutenant Commander Bryce Kennett entered with a cluster of officers, all laughing at some shared joke. At 38, Kennett was the newly appointed executive officer, eager to impress during the Admiral's inspection. He paused near the center of the hangar, directing staff to adjust equipment displays, straighten toolboxes, anything to create the perfect image of efficiency. When he turned, he nearly collided with Seraph's cleaning cart. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Kennett noticed her struggling with the heavy floor buffer, its cord tangled. A flicker of something crossed his face. Recognition, perhaps, of another human being worthy of assistance. He half-stepped toward her, hands slightly extended. Then he caught the sideways glances of his colleagues, the slight smirks. His hand dropped, and he continued walking as though he'd never seen her at all. Seraph's eyes registered this moment, a slight tightening around the corners, but her expression remained unchanged. She untangled the cord herself and continued working. By 0700, the hangar hummed with anticipation. Seraph retreated to a quiet corner for her brief breakfast break, opening a battered thermos of black coffee. The liquid steamed in the chilled air of the hangar, warming her calloused hands. At a nearby table, Ensign Adira Morrow sat alone, picking at a protein bar. At 24, she was one of the youngest officers assigned to the communications division, brilliant but awkward in the hierarchical world of military protocol. She glanced at Seraph, offering a small nod of recognition. Seraph returned the gesture almost imperceptibly. It was more acknowledgement than she typically received during her workdays. As Seraph poured her coffee, her sleeve pulled back slightly. Adira caught a glimpse of a thin, jagged scar running along her knuckles, disappearing up her wrist. Not an accidental injury, but something deliberate, something that spoke of violence. Seraph noticed the young ensign's gaze and subtly adjusted her sleeve, covering the mark once again. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second, long enough for Adira to see something that didn't match the woman's janitor coveralls, something hard, vigilant, assessing. The base-wide intercom crackled to life. Admiral Thorndyke arriving in 15 minutes. All personnel prepare for inspection. The entire hangar transformed into a hive of nervous energy. Officers straightened uniforms, technicians made final adjustments to equipment displays, and maintenance crews hurriedly stowed tools. Seraph collected her thermos and returned to work, moving toward the main entrance where rainwater had created a small puddle. As she maneuvered her mop across the wet area, she overheard fragments of conversation from nearby officers. "Thorndyke's reputation precedes him," one lieutenant said. 3 combat tours, presidential unit citation, then straight to Pentagon advisory. "I heard he fired his entire administrative staff his first day at DevCrew," another added. "Said they were too comfortable with mediocrity." "Well, he's earned the right to demand excellence," a third chimed in. "The man's a legend in special operations." Seraph kept her head down, absorbing the information while appearing entirely focused on her mopping. The puddle near the entrance was proving stubborn, water continuing to seep in from the morning downpour outside. She positioned a yellow caution sign nearby and worked methodically to dry the area before the Admiral's arrival. At precisely 0745, a black SUV pulled up outside. The hangar fell silent as Admiral Roland Thorndyke entered, flanked by his entourage. At 63, Thorndyke carried himself with the straight-backed confidence of a man accustomed to immediate respect. His uniform was impeccable, ribbons and medals creating a colorful display across his chest. Silver hair cut military short. His face bore the weathered lines of someone who had spent decades making life-and-death decisions. Following closely behind him was Commander Nash Harrington, his executive aide. 45 and meticulously groomed, Harrington carried a tablet, fingers constantly moving across its surface as he documented the Admiral's observations and commands. As the group moved through the hangar, Thorndyke inspected equipment, questioned officers about readiness protocols, and examined maintenance logs. His voice carried across the space, deep and authoritative. "Lieutenant, explain why these communication arrays haven't been upgraded to the new encryption standards," he demanded of one nervous officer. "Sir, we're scheduled for the upgrade next month when the new fiscal—" "Unacceptable," Thorndyke cut him off. "In a real-world operation, next month gets people killed. Commander Harrington, make a note. I want those upgrades expedited." "Yes, sir," Harrington replied, fingers tapping the tablet. The inspection continued, with Thorndyke finding fault with nearly everything he saw. The tension in the hangar grew with each criticism, officers and enlisted personnel alike standing straighter, faces tight with anxiety. Seraph continued working, trying to finish drying the entrance area before the Admiral's group reached it. Despite her efforts, a small wet patch remained, where water continued to seep in beneath the hangar door. She positioned herself to intercept the Admiral's path, intending to warn him of the slippery surface. Thorndyke approached, deep in conversation with Harrington about security protocols. He didn't notice Seraph standing near the wet floor sign, didn't see her slight gesture of warning. His polished dress shoe stepped directly into the puddle she had been trying to eliminate. Water splashed, speckling his immaculate shoes and the cuffs of his uniform pants. Thorndyke stopped mid-sentence, looking down at the water, then at Seraph with her mop. "What is this?" he demanded, voice cutting through the sudden silence of the hangar. Seraph straightened, mop in hand. "The floor is wet, sir. I was, attempting to—" "Who the hell hired you?" Thorndyke's voice echoed off the high metal ceiling. 10 years of budget cuts, and this is what we get? Cleaners who move like they've never spent a day in uniform. Laughter rippled through the entourage, nervous and obligatory. Seraph said nothing, eyes lowered. "Look at me when I'm speaking to you," Thorndyke demanded. Slowly, Seraph raised her gaze to meet his. For a brief moment, something flickered behind her calm exterior, something cold and dangerous that didn't belong on a janitor's face. It vanished so quickly that Thorndyke might have imagined it. "This floor should be dry before my arrival. Basic protocol," he continued. "Do they teach you nothing in orientation?" Commander Harrington leaned in, whispering something in Thorndyke's ear. The Admiral waved him off impatiently. "Name and employee number," Thorndyke demanded. "Seraph Voss, sir. Employee 27845, she replied, her voice unexpectedly steady and clear. not the voice of someone intimidated. Thorndyke narrowed his eyes slightly, sensing something off, but unable to place it. "Well, Ms. Voss, I suggest you learn to perform your duties more efficiently or find employment elsewhere. This is a military installation, not a shopping mall. Standards matter here." He turned away dismissively, continuing his inspection tour. The group moved on, leaving Seraph standing alone with her mop. A few officers glanced back at her, with expressions ranging from pity to mild amusement, then quickly returned their attention to the Admiral. As Seraph bent to pick up her fallen mop, her sleeve pulled back just enough to reveal the edge of something on her wrist. A mark, dark lines against pale skin, partially visible for only a second before she adjusted her sleeve. Ensign Adira Morrow, standing nearby, caught a glimpse of the marking. Her eyes widened in recognition, lips parting in surprise. She stared at Seraph with new intensity, watching as the janitor calmly returned to her work, as though the humiliating encounter had never happened. Throughout the remainder of the morning, Seraph continued her cleaning duties, moving methodically through the hangar as Admiral Thorndyke completed his inspection. If the public dressing down affected her, she showed no sign of it. Her movements remained precise, her expression neutral. Only someone watching very closely might have noticed how her eyes occasionally tracked the Admiral's position, how she seemed aware of every exit and entry point, how her hands sometimes flexed with a dexterity that suggested purposes beyond wielding a mop. After the inspection concluded, the hangar gradually emptied as personnel returned to regular duties. Thorndyke and his entourage departed for the command building, leaving behind an atmosphere of residual tension. Ensign Adira approached Seraph, who was wringing out her mop in a corner. "You didn't deserve that," Adira said, offering a clean towel. Seraph glanced at her, accepting, the towel with a slight nod. "It doesn't matter." "It does," Adira insisted. He was completely out of line. "Hierarchies exist for a reason, Ensign," Seraph replied, her voice unexpectedly refined, carrying subtle inflections that didn't match her custodial role. "People behave according to their perception of rank." Adira studied her, brow furrowed. "You sound like my advanced strategic operations professor at Annapolis." Something flickered in Seraph's eyes, caution, perhaps, or recognition of a misstep. She shrugged, deliberately coarsening her speech. "Picked up things here and there, listening to officers talk. 7 years cleaning this base, you hear a lot." Adira didn't appear convinced. 7 years? That's a long time in one position. "Some of us find our place and stay in it," Seraph replied, returning to her cart. "You should get back to your station, Ensign. Don't want to be caught fraternizing with the help." Adira hesitated, then lowered her voice. "That mark on your wrist. I only saw it for a second, but I think I recognized it." Seraph froze almost imperceptibly, then continued arranging cleaning supplies on her cart, not looking up. "Just an old tattoo. Youthful mistake. My father served in naval intelligence," Adira continued, undeterred. "He had photographs, unofficial ones. That symbol belongs to—" "You're mistaken, Ensign," Seraph interrupted, her tone suddenly carrying an authority that made Adira instinctively straighten her posture. "It's nothing. And you should return to your duties now." The command in her voice was unmistakable, not a request, but an order, one that expected immediate compliance. Adira blinked, momentarily confused by her own reaction. Yes, of course, I should go." She backed away, casting one more curious glance at Seraph before hurrying toward the communications center, leaving the janitor alone with her cart and her secrets. Later that afternoon, the officers' mess hall buzzed with conversation, most of it centered around Admiral Thorndyke's inspection. Lieutenant Commander Kennett sat with a group of junior officers, recounting the morning's events. "I've never seen someone find so many flaws in a 3-hour inspection," Kennett said, shaking his head. "The man has eyes like an eagle, and the temperament of a wounded bear." The officers laughed, tension releasing through shared commiseration. "Did you see how he tore into Lieutenant Farsi over the maintenance logs?" one asked. Poor guy looked ready to request immediate transfer. "Still," another officer added, "better Farsi than us. At least the Admiral's wrath was mostly directed at legitimate issues. Except maybe that scene with the janitor woman. That seemed excessive." Kennett nodded. "Agreed. Making an example of maintenance staff doesn't exactly inspire confidence in leadership." At a nearby table, Captain Alara Westlake had been quietly eating alone, apparently absorbed in reviewing documents on her tablet. At the mention of, the janitor, however, she glanced up, her attention suddenly focused on the conversation. Westlake was 53, with short salt and pepper hair and the lean physique of someone who still adhered to rigorous physical training despite her desk position. As Deputy Intelligence Officer for the base, she rarely participated in the casual conversations of the operational staff. Her presence in the mess hall was unusual enough that most gave her a wide berth, assuming she was there on business rather than for social interaction. She set down her coffee cup and turned slightly toward Kennett's table. "Which janitor?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. The officers looked up, surprised at her interest. Kennett straightened slightly, aware of Westlake's senior rank. "The older one, Captain. Gray hair, never speaks. Admiral Thorndyke dressed her down pretty harshly when he stepped in some water by the main doors." "Did you catch her name?" Westlake asked, her casual tone belied by the intensity in her eyes. "Voss, I think. Something unusual like that." Westlake's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around her coffee cup. "Did she have a mark on her right wrist? A tattoo, perhaps?" Kennett looked puzzled by the specific question. "I wouldn't know, ma'am. Why would I look at a janitor's wrist?" Westlake studied him for a moment, then gave a slight nod. "No reason, Commander, just curious." She gathered her tablet and half-finished lunch, rising from the table with controlled urgency. "If you'll excuse me, I have matters to attend to." As she departed, the officers exchanged confused glances. "What was that about?" one whispered. Kennett shrugged. "Intelligence types, always cryptic. Probably nothing." But it wasn't nothing. Captain Westlake moved through the corridors with purpose, her casual pace belying the racing thoughts behind her composed exterior. She entered a restricted access hallway, swiping her security badge at a heavy door marked "Classified Personnel Only." Inside, she approached a secure terminal and entered her credentials, followed by a 16-digit access code. The screen remained blank for several seconds as the system processed her high-level clearance. Finally, a prompt appeared. "Search parameters." Westlake's fingers hovered over the keyboard momentarily before she typed Voss, Seraph, Ghost Squadron plus Damascus Operation. The system processed her query, displaying a flashing red message. "Access restricted. Level 9, clearance required. Current user, level 7. Westlake's lips pressed into a thin line. She canceled the search, thinking for a moment before trying a different approach. She opened a secure communications channel and composed a brief message to a contact listed only as Mariner. Possible ghost asset. Identified at Anacostia Bowling. Voss, S request, verification and advisory. Urgent. She sent the message, then pulled out her secure phone. After a moment's hesitation, she dialed a number from memory rather than contacts. "Sir, it's Westlake," she said when the call connected. "I need to discuss a personnel matter, in person. No, it can't wait until morning. It concerns Operation Kingfisher." She listened briefly, nodding. "Yes, sir. I understand the sensitivity. I'll bring what I have to your office at 2100 hours. Disconnecting the call, Captain Westlake stood still for a moment, lost in thought. Then she logged out of the terminal and left the secure room, moving with renewed purpose toward the records archives section. Meanwhile, in a small maintenance closet deep in the administrative wing, Seraph Voss methodically cleaned her equipment, preparing for the evening shift. Her movements were automatic, practiced, allowing her mind to process the day's events. The encounter with Admiral Thorndyke had been unfortunate but manageable. Military leaders like him saw what they expected to see: a middle-aged janitor, insignificant, beneath notice except when failing to meet expectations. His dismissiveness was protective camouflage. More concerning was Ensign Morrow. The young officer was observant, dangerously so. She had noticed the tattoo, recognized it even from a brief glimpse. That suggested knowledge she shouldn't possess, connections that could be problematic. Seraph examined her right wrist, where beneath the sleeve of her coveralls lay the mark that had nearly exposed her today. The tattoo was small, no larger than a $50 coin, a spectral osprey clutching lightning bolts, inked in black and dark blue. The symbol of Ghost Squadron, a unit that officially never existed. She pulled her sleeve down firmly, ensuring the mark was completely covered. 7 years of careful anonymity had kept her safe, kept her buried in plain sight. One careless moment could unravel everything. The door to the maintenance closet opened suddenly. Seraph's hand moved instinctively to the cleaning spray at her belt, a movement too quick, too practiced for a custodian. A young maintenance worker stood in the doorway, startling at Seraph's defensive posture. "Sorry, Ms. Voss, didn't mean to sneak up on you." Seraph relaxed deliberately, resuming her role. "No problem, Kevin, just jumpy today." "Heard about what happened with the Admiral," Kevin said sympathetically. "Guy sounds like a real piece of work." Seraph shrugged. "Just another day, another officer." "Still, you okay? That kind of public dressing down can be rough." "I've had worse," Seraph replied, offering a small, practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Much worse?" Kevin nodded, sensing she didn't want to discuss it further. "Well, shift supervisor wants to know if you can cover the West Wing tonight. Marlene called in sick again." "Sure," Seraph agreed. "I'll handle it." After Kevin left, Seraph finished preparing her cart, mentally mapping the West Wing layout. Additional coverage meant access to areas closer to the command center, useful intelligence if her cover had indeed been compromised. If Westlake was who Seraph suspected she might be, things could become complicated very quickly. As she pushed her cart from the maintenance closet, Seraph passed a wall of small, grimy windows. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, dark and threatening, a perfect metaphor for what she sensed was coming. 7 years of quiet obscurity were about to end. That evening, Admiral Thorndyke worked late in his office, reviewing classified files for an upcoming briefing. The spacious room was sparsely decorated, a Naval Academy diploma on one wall, a few photographs of ships he had commanded, a glass case containing ceremonial swords. The desk was immaculate, papers arranged in precise stacks, everything in its designated place. Thorndyke frowned at the document before him. A threat assessment concerning emerging terrorist cells in the Horn of Africa. Something about the intelligence patterns seemed familiar, echoing operations he had overseen years earlier. He made a note to cross-reference with historical data from Operation Sandstorm. A knock at his door interrupted his concentration. "Enter," he called without looking up. Captain Westlake stepped inside, closing the door firmly behind her. She carried a worn manila folder, conspicuously not a digital file on a tablet, and stood at attention before his desk. "Sir, there's something you need to see before tomorrow's security briefing," she said, her voice professionally neutral, despite the tension evident in her posture. Thorndyke sighed, setting aside his work with obvious reluctance. "Can it wait, Captain? The JSOC conference call is in less than 12 hours, and I'm still reviewing the intelligence packets." "No, sir, it can't wait," Westlake replied firmly. "It pertains to Operation Kingfisher." Thorndyke's head snapped up, all irritation replaced by sharp focus. "How do you know that code name? Those files are sealed at the highest level." "Because I was there, sir," Westlake said quietly. She placed the folder on his desk. "9th Intelligence Support Battalion, attached to Task Force Blue. I provided real-time analysis during the extraction phase." Thorndyke studied her with new intensity, reassessing everything he thought he knew about the captain standing before him. He opened the folder cautiously. Inside was a single photograph, a tactical team in desert camouflage, faces either obscured by equipment or blacked out by redaction. One figure stood slightly apart, a visible tattoo on her exposed wrist. "This was taken in Yemen, 2014, Westlake explained. "The last documented operation of Ghost Squadron before Damascus." "And your point, Captain?" Thorndyke asked, though his tone suggested he was beginning to connect the dots himself. "The woman you berated in the hangar today, sir," Westlake said. "Her name is Commander Seraph Voss, former head of Ghost Squadron, Naval Special Warfare Development Group." Thorndyke stared in disbelief. "Impossible. Ghost Squadron is a myth, a boogeyman story operators tell at bars." "No, sir," Westlake contradicted him with quiet certainty. "After Kingfisher went sideways, the entire unit was officially disbanded. All records scrubbed, all personnel reassigned or discharged. But they existed, and she led them." Westlake slid another document across the desk, a presidential unit citation with all names redacted except one, CMDR S. Voss. Thorndyke examined the document, authentication codes confirming its legitimacy despite its heavily redacted state. "If what you're saying is true, why is a decorated Special Operations Commander mopping floors on my base? That's what concerns me, sir, Westlake replied. After I recognized her today, I made some discreet inquiries through secure channels. Someone else has been accessing her file recently. Multiple searches from within our own intelligence network, searching for Ghost Squadron survivors. Thorndyke's expression darkened. You think her cover is blown? I think it's about to be, Westlake said gravely. And given what happened in Damascus, that puts both her and this installation at risk. Thorndyke leaned back in his chair, processing this revelation. I need to know everything, Captain. Start with Damascus. What actually happened there? Westlake's face tightened almost imperceptibly. Sir, with respect, even I don't have clearance for the full Damascus brief. What I do know is that Commander Voss was the only member of her team to return. The official report states she carried 3 wounded men 12 miles through hostile territory after their extraction was compromised. All 3 died before reaching the secondary extraction point. The mission was classified as a catastrophic failure. And afterward, she was debriefed, decorated in a closed ceremony, then disappeared from all official records, Westlake explained. I always assumed she had been quietly retired or reassigned to deep cover operations. I never expected to find her here, hiding in plain sight as maintenance staff. Thorndyke stood, moving to the window that overlooked the darkened base. Rain had begun to fall, drops striking the glass in an irregular rhythm. We need to talk to her, privately, away from curious eyes. Agreed, sir, Westlake nodded. But I suggest a cautious approach. Commander Voss chose this cover for a reason. If we expose her identity carelessly, we may create exactly the situation she's been trying to avoid. You think she's hiding from someone specific? Thorndyke asked, turning back to face the captain. Sir, operators at her level don't simply vanish into custodial work unless they have compelling reasons, Westlake said carefully. Whatever happened in Damascus left more than physical scars. Thorndyke considered this, then nodded decisively. Find out when and where she'll be working tomorrow. Arrange a private meeting, secure location, no record of the conversation. Yes, sir, Westlake replied, gathering the folder. And, sir, about today's incident in the hangar. I'm aware of the irony, Captain, Thorndyke interrupted, a rare flash of humility crossing his features. I dressed down a woman who likely has more combat experience than half my command staff combined. More than all of them combined, sir, Westlake corrected softly. If even half the operational rumors about Ghost Squadron are true. As Captain Westlake departed, Admiral Thorndyke returned to his desk, the threat assessment forgotten. He opened his secure terminal and entered his highest clearance codes, searching for any fragment of information about Operation Damascus that might help him understand the woman hiding within his command. The system returned a single line of text. Operation Damascus. All files classified Presidential Directive. 2416. Verbal briefing only. Thorndyke stared at the screen, a cold feeling settling in his stomach. In 30 years of military service, he had encountered such classification only twice before. Both times, the operations had involved situations so politically volatile that no digital record could be permitted to exist. What had Commander Seraph Voss been involved in? And more importantly, what had followed her to his base? The following morning dawned gray and cold, rain still falling in a steady drizzle that muffled sounds across the base. Seraph arrived at her usual time, slipping through the side entrance of Hangar 7 with her cleaning cart. The hangar was quiet, populated only by the night shift, finishing their duties and a few early arriving technicians preparing for the day. Seraph moved to her designated starting point, filling her bucket with mechanical precision. Years of maintaining this routine had made it second nature, allowing her to remain aware of her surroundings while appearing entirely focused on her work. She noticed immediately that something had changed since yesterday. The personnel were watching her differently, quick, furtive glances rather than the usual disregard. Word of her encounter with Admiral Thorndyke had spread, but there was something else in their looks: curiosity, speculation. As Ensign Adira approached from the communications center, Seraph knew her cover had begun to crack. The young officer moved with purpose, carrying a stack of papers that clearly served as an excuse rather than a genuine errand. "Morning, Ms. Voss," Adira said quietly, stopping near Seraph's cart and pretending to reorganize her papers. "I was hoping to speak with you." "I'm working, Ensign," Seraph replied, not pausing in her mopping. Maintenance staff don't take social calls on duty. Adira glanced around, ensuring no one was within earshot. You didn't let me finish yesterday, about that mark on your wrist. Seraph stopped, fixing Adira with a stare that made the younger woman straighten involuntarily. I told you, it's nothing, an old tattoo. My father had the same one, Adira said, her voice barely above a whisper. Left wrist, he never talked about it. When I asked once, he said it was from a unit that never existed. Seraph's expression didn't change, but her grip tightened imperceptibly on the mop handle. Your father's name? Commander Elias Morrow, communications specialist. He died 6 years ago. Heart attack, they said. Something flickered in Seraph's eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or calculation. I'm sorry for your loss. Before he died, he told me to watch for others with the mark. Said if I ever found one, I should tell them Kingfisher still swims. He made me memorize it. I never knew what it meant. Seraph was perfectly still for 3 heartbeats. Then she resumed mopping, as though the conversation were of no consequence. Your father was mistaken, Ensign, perhaps confused in his final days. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to finish this section before personnel changeover. Adira didn't move. There's something else. After our conversation yesterday, I checked the base employment records. There is no Sarah Voss listed among maintenance contractors. Not here, not anywhere in the Department of Defense database. Clerical error, Seraph said smoothly. Happens all the time with contract staff. No, I don't think it does. Adira took a half step closer, her voice gaining confidence. Who are you really? Before Seraph could respond, the hangar's public address system crackled to life. Maintenance worker Voss, report to Facilities Management Office immediately. Seraph glanced up at the speakers, then back to Adira. Duty calls, Ensign. I suggest you return to your assigned post and forget this conversation. For your own safety. She moved past Adira, guiding her cleaning cart toward the exit. As she passed, she added quietly, "And Ensign, your father was a good man, one of the best I knew." Adira stood frozen, watching Seraph's retreating back with widening eyes. Instead of heading to the facilities office, Seraph took a different corridor, moving with quiet purpose through the administrative wing. She had recognized the summons for what it was, not from facilities management, but a coded directive established years ago for emergency contact. Someone knew her protocol, which meant someone knew her identity. She made 3 seemingly random turns, doubling back once to ensure she wasn't followed, before approaching a service elevator restricted to maintenance use. Inside, she inserted her ID card, then entered a sequence on the keypad that wasn't part of the standard floor options. The elevator descended to a sub-level not listed on the directory. When the doors opened, Captain Westlake was waiting, alone in a dimly lit corridor. "Commander Voss," Westlake said, the title both a greeting and confirmation. Seraph stepped out of the elevator, her posture subtly shifting. No longer the deferential maintenance worker, she stood with the quiet authority of a senior officer. "Captain, I wondered when you'd make contact." 7 years, Westlake said, studying her. 7 years mopping floors and emptying trash bins. Why? You know why, Seraph replied. You were there for the aftermath. Westlake nodded slowly. Damascus changed everything. But there were other options. Witness protection, foreign posting, even legitimate retirement. All too visible, Seraph said. Too many eyes watching those channels. This way, I disappeared completely. Not completely enough, Westlake countered. Someone's been accessing the sealed files, running searches on Ghost Squadron personnel through secure networks. Military intelligence? Looks that way, but the access points keep shifting. Whoever it is has high-level clearance and knows how to cover their tracks. Seraph absorbed this information, her expression betraying nothing. How did you find me? Pure chance, Westlake admitted. I recognized you during the Admiral's inspection. The wrist tattoo confirmed it. And you've reported your discovery to Thorndyke, Seraph stated, rather than asked. Had to. He needs to know who's operating on his base. Seraph's eyes hardened slightly. I'm not operating. I'm hiding. There's a difference. Is there? Because right now it looks like you've embedded yourself in a high-security military installation under false credentials. That raises questions, Commander. Questions you're not cleared to ask, Seraph replied coldly. Where's Thorndyke now? Waiting for us, Westlake said, gesturing down the corridor. Secure briefing room. No surveillance, no records. Seraph considered this, then nodded once. After you, Captain. They moved silently through the corridor, passing doors with advanced security locks. This level housed the base's most classified operations: intelligence analysis, special project development, secure communications with field teams. Few personnel had unrestricted access, and fewer still knew of all the activities conducted here. Westlake stopped at the final door, entering a complex code followed by a biometric scan. The door slid open to reveal a small, Spartanly furnished briefing room. Admiral Thorndyke sat alone at the head of a table designed for 12, reviewing documents. He looked up as they entered. For a long moment, no one spoke. Thorndyke studied Seraph with new awareness, seeing beyond the maintenance uniform to the woman beneath. Gone was the deference of yesterday. Seraph stood at a relaxed parade rest, meeting his gaze directly. "Commander Voss," Thorndyke finally said, rising to his feet. "Or do you prefer Ms. Voss now?" "Either is fine, Admiral," she replied evenly, "though I've grown accustomed to anonymity." "Please sit," Thorndyke gestured to the chairs. "We have much to discuss." Seraph took a seat opposite him, with Westlake positioning herself between them. On the table lay a small device, signal jammer, preventing any electronic surveillance. "I owe you an apology," Thorndyke began. "No, you don't," Seraph interrupted. "You treated me exactly as my cover required. Any other response would have drawn attention." Thorndyke nodded slowly. "Nevertheless, had I known who you were—" "The point was that you didn't know," Seraph said firmly. "No one was supposed to know. That was the entire arrangement." "What arrangement?" Thorndyke asked. "Your file has been purged from all official records. Even with my clearance level, I found only fragments, most heavily redacted. Ghost Squadron itself exists only in rumors." "That's by design," Seraph replied. "After Damascus, certain decisions were made at levels above either of us. The unit was disbanded, records expunged, and surviving personnel were reassigned." "Surviving personnel," Thorndyke repeated. "According to what little information I could find, that's just you." Seraph's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. A shadow of old pain quickly suppressed. "Officially, yes." Westlake leaned forward. "Commander, someone is looking for Ghost Squadron members, accessing sealed files, cross-referencing deployment records against medical discharges from that period. They're hunting systematically." "How long?" Seraph asked. "First digital fingerprints appeared 3 months ago. Activity has intensified in the last 2 weeks." Seraph absorbed this information silently, her mind working through implications and contingencies. "I need to leave, today." "Running won't solve this," Thorndyke countered. "If they've tracked you this far, disappearing again only confirms they're on the right trail." "With respect, Admiral, you don't understand what you're dealing with," Seraph said, her voice hardening. "Damascus wasn't a mission failure. It was a betrayal. Someone very high up the chain sold out my team to protect political interests." Thorndyke's expression darkened. "That's a serious accusation, Commander." "It's not an accusation. It's a fact I've lived with for 7 years," Seraph replied. 12 operators went in. Only I made it out, carrying 3 dying team members across the Syrian border. The extraction team that should have been waiting had been recalled hours earlier, without our knowledge. "By whom?" Westlake asked. "That's what I spent 2 years trying to determine, before I realized the investigation itself was putting more people at risk," Seraph said. "Witnesses disappeared. Records were altered. Eventually, I received a clear message. Stop looking, or more people would die." "So you disappeared," Thorndyke concluded. "Became a ghost to hide from ghosts," Seraph confirmed. "Took this position because it provided access to secure facilities while maintaining a perfect cover of invisibility. No one looks at maintenance staff. No one remembers our faces or names." "Until yesterday," Westlake pointed out, "when the Admiral's dressing down made you the center of attention." "An unfortunate coincidence," Seraph acknowledged. "But the real problem is the database searches you've detected. If someone has reopened the Damascus file, it means either they're tying up loose ends, or they're afraid you've found something," Thorndyke finished. "Which is it, Commander?" Seraph met his gaze directly. 6 months ago, a former intelligence analyst connected to the Damascus operation died in a single-car accident, David Mercer. He had contacted me through an old emergency protocol, claiming he had proof of who authorized the extraction cancellation. Before we could meet, his vehicle went off a bridge. Brake lines cut. You think it's connected to these database searches? I think nothing happens in isolation when it comes to Damascus, Seraph said. Someone's worried, which means someone's vulnerable. Thorndyke considered this, drumming his fingers lightly on the table. What do you need? Sir? Seraph asked, slightly taken aback. To finish what you started, Thorndyke clarified. To find whoever betrayed your team and bring them to justice. What do you need? Seraph studied him, assessing his sincerity. Why would you help me? This could reach into the highest levels of military or government leadership. Your career? My career is already made, Commander, Thorndyke interrupted. What matters to me is the integrity of the services and the safety of the personnel under my command. If someone betrayed a special operations team for political gain, that person is a threat to every uniform in this building. For the first time, Seraph's composure showed a crack, a brief flicker of something that might have been hope or relief, quickly masked by professional detachment. I need access to secure communications, temporary reinstatement of my clearance level, and a small team I can trust absolutely. You have it, Thorndyke said without hesitation. Captain Westlake will handle the administrative side, quietly. There's one more thing, Seraph added. Ensign Adira Morrow. She's connected to this whether she knows it or not. Her father was Elias Morrow, my communication specialist in Ghost Squadron. Westlake frowned. Official records show Commander Morrow died of natural causes. Official records show a lot of things that aren't true, Seraph replied. Elias knew something was coming. He must have prepared his daughter, given her a message meant for surviving team members. What message? Thorndyke asked. Kingfisher still swims, Seraph quoted. It's a reference to an earlier operation before Damascus. Something connected. I'll have Ensign Morrow brought in, Westlake offered. No, I'll make contact, Seraph countered. Less suspicious that way. For now, maintain the illusion that I'm exactly what I appear to be, just a maintenance worker who received a public reprimand. Thorndyke nodded his agreement. How will you proceed? Carefully, Seraph said, rising from her chair. 7 years of silence has taught me patience, if nothing else. First, I need to know who else might be compromised. What about your cover? Westlake asked. After yesterday's incident, people are talking. Let them talk, Seraph replied. Gossip about an embarrassed janitor fades quickly. It provides excellent camouflage for my real movements. As the meeting concluded, Thorndyke extended his hand. Commander Voss, I want you to know, I've read what records remain of your service. Few operators in history have accomplished what you have. Seraph accepted the handshake briefly. With respect, Admiral, you've read sanitized reports. The reality was both better and worse than any document could capture. Nevertheless, Thorndyke insisted, it's an honor to have you on my base, regardless of the capacity in which you serve. A ghost of a smile touched Seraph's lips. Even when I'm leaving puddles for you to step in? Especially then, Thorndyke replied, returning the smile. Keeps me humble. As Seraph prepared to leave, resuming her janitor's posture and demeanor, Westlake stopped her with a final question. Commander, there's one thing I don't understand. Of all the places you could have hidden, why choose to live in plain sight on a military base? Why not disappear completely, change your name, leave the country? Seraph paused at the door. Because, Captain, hunters always look for prey that's running. They rarely look for prey that's standing still, watching them. She slipped out, returning to her maintenance cart and resuming her rounds as though the extraordinary meeting had never occurred. Throughout the remainder of the day, Seraph maintained her cover meticulously, performing her cleaning duties while quietly observing the base's operations. She paid particular attention to security rotations, access protocols, and the movement patterns of key personnel. Information that had been merely habit for 7 years now took on renewed strategic importance. Late in the afternoon, as she was finishing the Eastern Administrative Wing, she noticed Ensign Adira Morrow leaving the communications center, heading toward the officers' quarters. Seraph adjusted her route to create a seemingly accidental intersection. They met in a quiet corridor between buildings, the rain providing cover for a private conversation as other personnel hurried past, with heads down against the weather. Ensign, Seraph acknowledged quietly, emptying a trash bin as though that were her only purpose. Adira glanced around before responding. I've been thinking about our conversation this morning. Have you now? Seraph continued her work, not looking up. "My father left me more than just a message," Adira said, her voice low. "There's a storage unit in Arlington. The access code is his birthday backwards. He said if I ever met someone with the osprey mark, I should tell them about it." Seraph's hand stilled momentarily. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I looked up the mission records from the period when he died," Adira replied. "Everything's classified or deleted. But cross-referencing deployment dates with his personal calendar, I found something. The word Damascus written on the day before he supposedly had his heart attack." Seraph finally looked up, meeting Adira's eyes directly. The young ensign didn't flinch from her gaze. "You have your father's instincts," Seraph observed quietly, "and his courage, neither of which will keep you safe if you pursue this further." "He was more than just your communications specialist, wasn't he?" Adira asked. Seraph glanced around, ensuring they remained unobserved. "Your father saved my life, twice. He was brilliant, loyal, and fiercely protective of his team, and of you." "Then help me understand what happened to him," Adira pressed. "The man I knew would never have been taken down by a heart attack at 46. He ran 5 miles every morning." "Some truths are dangerous, Ensign," Seraph warned, "especially ones connected to Damascus." "I can handle dangerous," Adira insisted. "I'm not the child he left behind anymore." Seraph studied her for a long moment, weighing options and risks. Finally, she made a decision. "The storage unit," she said quietly. "Have you visited it yourself?" "No, I only learned about it last year, going through his personal effects. I wasn't ready then." "Don't go alone," Seraph instructed. "Don't tell anyone where you're going, and watch for surveillance." "You think someone might be watching me?" Adira asked, her eyes widening slightly. "If they've connected you to your father and your father to Ghost Squadron, absolutely," Seraph confirmed. "Maintain normal routines. Use leave time for the Arlington trip, nothing suspicious. And after I check the storage unit, there's a coffee shop on Wilson Boulevard called The Percolator. Go there Monday, 09:30. Order a black coffee, sit by the window. I'll find you." Adira nodded, committing the instructions to memory. "Should I bring whatever's in the storage unit?" "No, memorize it if possible. If not, secure it somewhere that can't be traced to you," Seraph advised. "Trust no one, Ensign, not even people you've worked with for years." "I trust you," Adira said simply. Something flickered across Seraph's face, surprise, perhaps, or an echo of old pain. "Your father would be proud of the officer you've become, but he'd also want you to be careful." With that, Seraph returned to her maintenance duties, moving down the corridor as though they had exchanged nothing more than casual pleasantries. That evening, as darkness fell across the base, Seraph finished her shift and headed toward the staff parking lot. Her routine was consistent. Same departure time, same route off base, same modest apartment 10 miles away. Tonight, however, she altered her pattern, taking a different exit and driving to a small park 3 miles from the base perimeter. The park was nearly deserted in the persistent rain, a few dedicated joggers circling the paths with heads bent against the weather. Seraph parked in a far corner of the lot, engine off, lights out, waiting. 20 minutes later, another vehicle pulled in, a nondescript gray sedan that parked 3 spaces away. Admiral Thorndyke emerged, wearing civilian clothes and a rain jacket with the hood pulled up. He walked casually to a covered picnic area, where he appeared to be making a phone call. Seraph gave it another 5 minutes before joining him, approaching from an angle that would appear random to any observer. Under the shelter, Thorndyke acknowledged her with a slight nod. "Secure location, as requested. We have perhaps 10 minutes before our separate arrivals might seem suspicious." "That's enough," Seraph said, getting straight to the point. "I've been compromised beyond what we initially thought. Ensign Morrow has information about a storage unit her father maintained. If she knows about it, others might too." Thorndyke frowned. "What kind of information?" "Unknown, but Elias Morrow was thorough. He wouldn't have left a dead drop without significant content," Seraph explained. "I've arranged to meet Adira after she checks the unit, but that creates a window of vulnerability." "You want protection for her," Thorndyke concluded. "Deniable surveillance," Seraph corrected. "Someone watching the watcher, not obviously connected to either of us." Thorndyke considered this. "I have a former student at Quantico who owes me a favor. Civilian now, private security consultant, reliable and discreet." "Good. Have them establish a perimeter, but no direct contact, Seraph instructed. Meanwhile, I need to activate some old resources, people Ghost Squadron worked with who weren't on official rosters. That sounds outside proper channels, Commander, Thorndyke observed, though his tone suggested he expected nothing less. Damascus happened because we followed proper channels, Seraph replied coldly. I won't make that mistake again. Thorndyke nodded, accepting her position. What about Captain Westlake? How much does she know? Only what was in the official after-action reports, Seraph said, which means almost nothing of substance. She was peripheral to the operation, brought in for the extraction that never happened. Do you trust her? Seraph considered the question carefully. I trust that she believes what she's telling us. Whether she's being manipulated by others is harder to determine. Fair assessment, Thorndyke acknowledged. She's arranging your temporary reinstatement now. Classified consultancy contract, minimal digital footprint. Should be in place by 0800 tomorrow. I'll need access to secure communications that can't be traced through base systems, Seraph added. Thorndyke reached into his jacket, producing a small, unmarked phone. Satellite relay through 3 commercial proxies, untraceable to us or the base. Seraph accepted the device, checking it briefly before pocketing it. One more thing. The database searches Westlake detected. I need the exact search parameters and access points. Already on the phone, Thorndyke assured her, along with everything we have on Mercer's accident. They stood in silence for a moment, rain drumming on the metal roof above them. Despite the urgency of their situation, Seraph felt an unfamiliar sensation, the weight of solitary vigilance lifting slightly with the knowledge that someone else now shared her burden. Why are you really helping me, Admiral? She asked finally. This could end careers, including yours. Even if we find whoever betrayed my team, the political fallout will be radioactive. Thorndyke's expression hardened. 3 years ago, I lost a nephew, Lieutenant Jeffrey Thorndyke, Force Recon. Extraction team never arrived at the designated coordinates. Official report cited communications failure, weather conditions, mechanical issues with the helicopters. But the weather was clear, and those birds had been serviced the day before. Understanding dawned in Seraph's eyes. You think it's connected? I think once is tragedy, twice is coincidence, 3 times is enemy action, Thorndyke quoted grimly. There have been at least 7 similar incidents across different branches and operational theaters in the past decade. Always highly classified missions, always communication or mechanical failures that leave operators stranded. A pattern, Seraph murmured. One I've been tracking privately, Thorndyke confirmed. Finding you on my base wasn't just chance, Commander. It was opportunity. Seraph reassessed everything she knew about Thorndyke, seeing his reputation for demanding excellence in a new light. Not merely a perfectionist, but a man haunted by preventable failure. We should leave separately, she said finally. I'll make contact tomorrow through secure channels. Thorndyke nodded, extending his hand. Watch your back, Commander. Always do, Seraph replied, shaking his hand firmly before walking back into the rain. As she drove away from the park, Seraph's mind processed this new information, recalibrating her understanding of the situation. If Thorndyke was right about the pattern of abandoned teams, the conspiracy reached further than even she had suspected. Not merely a betrayal of Ghost Squadron, but a systematic sacrifice of special operators across multiple branches and years. The question was why? What possible objective could be worth such a calculated expenditure of highly trained personnel? And who had the authority to orchestrate such operations across different command structures? Back in her small apartment, a Spartan 1-bedroom with minimal personal touches, Seraph enacted security protocols that had become second nature. She checked for signs of entry, none, swept for surveillance devices, clear, and verified that her emergency exit routes remained viable. Only then did she allow herself to relax marginally. She opened her laptop, accessing a heavily encrypted drive hidden behind multiple security layers. Here she kept her private investigation into Damascus. Fragments of information gathered over 7 years, connections mapped between seemingly unrelated events, names of figures whose authority intersected with the operation. Near the center of this digital web was a name, General Marcus Kierstead, Joint Special Operations Command. Never directly linked to the Damascus failure, but present in adjacent decision chains. 3 weeks after the operation, he had been promoted to a Pentagon advisory position with expanded authority over cross-branch special operations. Seraph had tracked him carefully over the years, noting patterns in deployments that fell under his purview. Statistically, teams operating with his authorization experienced a 22% higher rate of extraction failures than the special operations average, not enough to trigger formal investigation, but significant to someone looking for it. If Kierstead was behind the betrayal of Ghost Squadron, what was Elias Morrow's connection? As communications specialist, Morrow would have had access to all transmission logs from the operation, including, potentially, the order to recall the extraction team. If he had preserved evidence of who issued that order, Seraph closed the laptop, her decision made. Tomorrow she would begin reactivating old contacts, leveraging resources she had deliberately left untouched for years. The risk was substantial, but the alternative, allowing whoever had betrayed her team to continue operating unchecked, was unacceptable. As she prepared for bed, performing her nightly security checks, a notification appeared on the secure phone Thorndyke had provided. A text message, encrypted, facial recognition. Alert. Subject Voss. Identified on base security cameras. Search origin. Pentagon internal network. Attached was a timestamp from that morning, during her meeting with Thorndyke and Westlake. Someone had been watching, someone with access to both Pentagon systems and base security feeds. Seraph stared at the message, a cold certainty settling in her chest. Her cover wasn't cracking, it was already blown. Someone knew exactly who she was, where she was, and most dangerous of all, that she was actively investigating again. The hunters had found her. Dawn arrived with a sense of inevitability. Seraph moved through her morning routine with heightened awareness, eyes tracking reflections in windows and mirrors, ears attuned to the slightest deviation from normal neighborhood sounds. Her apartment revealed no signs of intrusion, but that meant little. Professionals wouldn't leave evidence. The facial recognition alert changed everything. Not only had her cover been compromised, but whoever was hunting her now knew she was actively investigating again. The timeline for action had compressed dramatically. She dressed in her maintenance uniform, the blue coveralls that had been her camouflage for 7 years. As she pulled on the worn garment, she felt a strange sense of farewell. One way or another, this disguise would soon be discarded. The drive to the base followed her usual route, but nothing about this day would be routine. At the security checkpoint, the guard waved her through with the same disinterest as always. If he had been instructed to watch for her, he showed no sign of it. Hangar 7 loomed ahead, its massive doors already open for the day's operations. Inside, personnel moved with the coordinated precision of a military installation at full readiness. Aircraft technicians performed maintenance checks, communications officers hurried between stations, and the command staff congregated near the central briefing area. Seraph pushed her cleaning cart through the side entrance, head slightly bowed, embodying the invisible workers she had portrayed for so long. Her eyes, however, missed nothing. 3 new security personnel stationed at key points. Captain Westlake engaged in intense conversation with Commander Harrington near the communications center. Admiral Thorndyke nowhere in sight. She began her normal cleaning routine, starting with the western corner as always. The rhythmic motion of mopping allowed her to observe without appearing to watch, to listen without seeming to hear. "Morning, Ms. Voss." Seraph turned to find Ensign Adira Morrow standing nearby, tablet in hand, expression carefully neutral. "Ensign," Seraph acknowledged with a slight nod. "I've been asked to inform all auxiliary staff that there will be a security drill at 1100 hours, Adira said, her voice carrying the formal tone of someone delivering an official message. All non-essential personnel are to report to designated assembly points. Seraph understood immediately. This wasn't a routine notification. It was a coded warning. Something was happening at 1100 hours, and Adira was ensuring Seraph would be positioned appropriately. "Thank you, Ensign. I'll adjust my cleaning schedule accordingly," Seraph replied, matching the professional tone, while her mind rapidly processed implications. Adira hesitated, then added, "The storage facility had interesting architecture, very secure." Seraph continued mopping, not reacting visibly. "I imagine so. It contained historical documents, family records, perhaps worth reviewing together sometime," Adira finished, her meaning clear despite the circumspect language. Perhaps, Seraph agreed neutrally. After the security drill. Adira nodded and moved away, resuming her duties with no indication of their exchange's significance. Seraph continued her work, mind racing. Adira had accessed the storage unit earlier than planned, likely prompted by the same urgency Seraph felt. Whatever Elias Morrow had preserved there, his daughter now possessed it. The question was, who else might know about its existence? At 09:30, Seraph rolled her cart to the supply closet for a scheduled restocking. Once inside, she quickly retrieved the secure phone Thorndyke had provided, sending a brief encrypted message. Contact made. Package secured. Timetable accelerated. Confirm 1100 operation. The response came almost immediately. Confirmed. Command Center. Briefing scheduled. Principals will be present. Approach with caution. Westlake uncertain asset. Seraph deleted the exchange and returned the phone to its hiding place. So, Thorndyke shared her concerns about Westlake. Interesting. The captain had been helpful thus far, but her exact role in the Damascus operation remained unclear. Had she been peripherally involved as she claimed, or something more? For the next hour, Seraph maintained her cover while methodically positioning herself for what would come. She cleaned areas that provided sightlines to security stations, noting personnel rotations and weapons configurations. She emptied trash bins near communication consoles, observing access protocols and active monitors. She polished floors and corridors that would serve as potential extraction routes if things went wrong. All the while, she watched for signs of surveillance directed specifically at her. Nothing obvious appeared, which was itself concerning. If her hunters knew her location, they should be watching more carefully, unless their plan had already advanced beyond simple observation. At 10:45, the hangar's activity increased noticeably. Officers gathered near the command center, joined by several visitors in formal dress uniforms. Among them was a tall, distinguished man with silver-gray hair and the insignia of a 3-star general. General Marcus Kierstead had arrived. Seraph felt a cold stillness settle over her. The architect of her team's betrayal, the man whose decisions had condemned 11 operators to death in the Syrian desert, stood less than 50 meters from her. For a moment, all her carefully constructed plans seemed inadequate compared to the simple, direct alternative now available. Her hand tightened almost imperceptibly on her mop handle. Then training reasserted itself. Vengeance without evidence solved nothing. Without proof of Kierstead's culpability, his death would be merely another tragedy, not justice. She maneuvered her cleaning cart toward the hangar's eastern section, establishing position near an equipment storage area that offered both cover and multiple exit paths. From this vantage point, she could observe the command center while remaining peripheral to attention. At precisely 1100, Admiral Thorndyke entered the hangar, accompanied by his senior staff. His gaze swept the space, pausing momentarily on Seraph's position, an acknowledgement so brief that only someone watching for it would notice. "Ladies and gentlemen," Thorndyke addressed the assembled officers, his voice carrying easily through the hangar. "We're honored today by the presence of General Kierstead from the Joint Special Operations Command. He'll be conducting a review of our operational readiness and security protocols." Kierstead stepped forward, offering a practiced smile to the gathered personnel. "Thank you, Admiral. I'm looking forward to seeing firsthand the excellent work being done at Anacostia Bowling, particularly in light of recent security concerns." Something in his tone made Seraph's instincts flare. This wasn't a routine inspection. Kierstead had come with a specific purpose, one related to her presence. The official party moved toward the command center for what was ostensibly a briefing. As they passed near her position, Seraph kept her head down, focusing on her mopping. Kierstead walked past without a glance, engaged in conversation with Captain Westlake. Seraph caught fragments of their exchange. Surveillance confirms, identification protocols, containment procedures. Then they were past, entering the command center where privacy screens were being erected for the classified briefing. Seraph continued her work, circling gradually toward the hangar's main entrance. The security drill Adira had mentioned would provide cover for her to move more freely through the facility, potentially accessing areas normally restricted to maintenance personnel. At 11:15, the base-wide announcement system activated. "Attention all personnel. Security, drill commencing. proceed to designated assembly areas. This is a drill. Throughout the hangar, non-essential personnel began moving toward the exits, following established evacuation procedures. Security teams took up predetermined positions, communicating through headsets. The atmosphere shifted from routine operation to focused readiness. Seraph joined the flow of auxiliary staff heading for the nearest assembly point, pushing her cleaning cart ahead of her. As she approached the exit, she noticed Commander Harrington observing the evacuation, tablet in hand. Their eyes met briefly as she passed. "Ms. Voss," Harrington called, stopping her. "A moment, please." Seraph halted, maintaining her janitor persona. "Sir, Admiral Thorndyke has requested your assistance with some cleaning in the command center," Harrington said, his expression revealing nothing. "Apparently there was a coffee spill that needs immediate attention." "Of course, sir," Seraph replied deferentially. "I'll head there now." "I'll escort you," Harrington added. "Security protocols during the drill." They walked in silence back toward the command center, Seraph pushing her cart, mind-calculating possibilities. This could be the opportunity Thorndyke had engineered, getting her into the secure area where Kierstead was present. Or it could be a trap. The command center doors opened as they approached. Inside, the briefing appeared to be in progress, with officers gathered around display screens showing base security diagrams. Admiral Thorndyke stood at the head of the table, with General Kierstead seated prominently to his right. Captain Westlake occupied a position near the door, her posture alert. "The maintenance worker as requested, sir," Harrington announced as they entered. All eyes turned towards Seraph. The moment stretched, charged with unspoken tension. Thorndyke nodded. "Thank you, Commander. Ms. Voss, we've had a spill that requires attention." Seraph moved forward with her cart, head slightly bowed, playing her role to perfection. As she approached the table, she noted the positions of all personnel, the locations of weapons, the distance to exits. General Kierstead studied her with cold calculation, no recognition visible in his expression. "This is the individual, Admiral." "Yes, sir," Thorndyke confirmed. "Seraph Voss, maintenance staff for the past 7 years." "Interesting," Kierstead mused. "Nothing remarkable in appearance. Perfect camouflage, I suppose." Seraph kept her eyes lowered, focusing on cleaning supplies as she prepared to address the supposed coffee spill. Every muscle in her body was coiled with readiness, though nothing in her outward demeanor betrayed this. "Before we proceed," Kierstead continued, "I believe Captain Westlake has something to add to our security assessment." Westlake stepped forward, her expression professionally neutral. "Yes, General. Based on our surveillance and database analysis, we've confirmed the presence of an unauthorized operative on base." The room tensed perceptibly. "An operative with high-level tactical training and access to classified systems," Westlake continued. "Someone operating under deep cover for years, gathering intelligence on our operations." Seraph's hand moved imperceptibly closer to a spray bottle on her cart, a cleaning solution she had modified that morning to create a temporary visual impairment if needed. "The evidence is conclusive," Westlake said, reaching for a folder on the table. "We've identified the infiltrator as Commander Nash Harrington," she finished, turning suddenly to face the startled executive officer. For a heartbeat, the room froze in collective surprise. Harrington's expression shifted from confusion to cold calculation. "That's absurd, Captain. You've clearly lost your—" His denial was cut short as Admiral Thorndyke spoke quietly. "We have the transmission logs, Commander. Every communication you sent to Syrian intelligence before the Damascus extraction, every report back to General Kierstead afterward." The atmosphere in the room transformed instantly. Security personnel who had seemed focused on Seraph now turned their attention to Harrington. Hands moved subtly toward sidearms. Harrington's eyes darted between faces, assessing options. "This is a misunderstanding. General, tell them." Kierstead's face had hardened into an unreadable mask. "What exactly should I tell them, Commander?" "That we were following orders," Harrington insisted, desperation edging into his voice. "That sacrifices were necessary for the greater objective." "Interesting choice of words," Thorndyke observed coldly. "Sacrifices." Seraph straightened slowly, abandoning the janitor's posture she had maintained for years. When she spoke, her voice carried the unmistakable authority of command. 11 operators," she said quietly, each word precise and cutting. 11 of the best-trained personnel in special operations, left without extraction, hunted through hostile territory, tortured, executed. All eyes turned to her, recognition dawning as her true identity emerged from beneath the maintenance worker disguise. "Commander Voss," Kierstead acknowledged, surprise evident in his tone. "Reports of your survival were apparently accurate." "As were reports of your betrayal, General," Seraph replied, her gaze unflinching. Kierstead's expression remained composed, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Betrayal is a strong word, Commander. National security involves difficult decisions." "Not decisions to abandon your own people," Thorndyke interjected sharply. "Not decisions to sacrifice operators to cover up unauthorized operations." "You don't understand the complexities involved," Kierstead began. "I understand perfectly," Seraph cut him off. "Damascus wasn't a mission failure. It was a deliberate sacrifice. My team discovered something we weren't supposed to find, evidence of U.S. officials collaborating with the same terrorist network we were sent to dismantle. When we reported it through proper channels, the decision was made to eliminate the problem." Harrington's hand moved suddenly toward his sidearm. Before anyone could react, Seraph had already stepped forward, her movements a blur of practiced efficiency. In one fluid motion, she disarmed him, sweeping his legs and pinning him to the floor, his own weapon now pressed against his temple. The room erupted into motion. Security personnel drew weapons, officers backed away from the confrontation, and Thorndyke barked orders for everyone to stand down. 7 years, Seraph said to Harrington, her voice deadly quiet. 7 years I've waited for this moment, watching, planning, gathering evidence while you and Kierstead continued your operations, sacrificing more teams, more operators. "You don't have proof," Harrington gasped, struggling ineffectively against her hold. "But I do," came a new voice from the doorway. Ensign Adira Morrow entered, carrying a sealed document case. "My father knew what was coming. He made copies of everything, the transmission logs, the recall orders, the communication between General Kierstead and Syrian intelligence. He encrypted it all and left it where only another Ghost Squadron operative would know to look." She placed the case on the table, her eyes finding Seraph's. "He knew someone would survive. He believed it would be you." Kierstead's composed facade finally cracked. "This is preposterous. These accusations are fully documented and independently verified," Thorndyke interrupted. "Captain Westlake has spent the last 24 hours confirming the authenticity of Commander Morrow's evidence. 3 separate cryptographic analyses confirm the documents haven't been altered." Westlake stepped forward, her posture rigid with controlled anger. "I lost friends in Damascus, General. We all did. I've spent 7 years believing it was a mission failure, a tragedy of war. To discover it was a deliberate betrayal by our own command structure. You know nothing of what was at stake," Kierstead snapped, his aristocratic composure crumbling. "The diplomatic consequences if that intelligence had become public?" 11 lives, Seraph said simply, rising from her position, while keeping Harrington secured. 11 operators who trusted the chain of command, who believed their country wouldn't abandon them. The room fell silent, the full weight of the betrayal settling over everyone present. Thorndyke moved to the center of the room, his authority palpable. "General Marcus Kierstead, Commander Nash Harrington, by the authority vested in me as base commander, you are hereby detained pending investigation by the Department of Defense, Inspector General, and the Judge Advocate General's Corps for violations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, including, but not limited to, dereliction of duty, conspiracy, providing aid to enemy combatants, and accessory to murder." Security personnel moved in, taking custody of both men. As Harrington was led away, his eyes locked with Seraph's one final time, hatred mingling with something like fear. Kierstead maintained his dignity even in defeat, straightening his uniform as the security team approached. "This won't end here, Thorndyke. There are others involved, people with far more influence than you can imagine." "Then we'll find them too," Thorndyke replied evenly. "The chain of betrayal ends today." As the room cleared, leaving only Thorndyke, Westlake, Adira, and Seraph, a strange quiet descended. 7 years of vigilance, of waiting, of living as someone else, culminating in this moment of revelation. Seraph felt oddly weightless, as though a burden she had carried for so long had suddenly lifted. She looked down at her hands, calloused from years of manual labor that had been both cover and penance. "Commander Voss," Thorndyke said formally, "on behalf of the United States Navy, I offer an official acknowledgement of the injustice done to you and your team. It is insufficient, but it is sincere." Seraph nodded, accepting the gesture for what it was. "What happens now?" "The investigation will be thorough," Westlake answered. "With the evidence Ensign Morrow provided, we can trace the full extent of the conspiracy. Everyone involved will be held accountable." "And Ghost Squadron?" Seraph asked. "The true story of what happened in Damascus." Thorndyke's expression was solemn. "That depends partly on you, Commander. There will need to be testimonies, depositions, likely closed congressional hearings. The full accounting may never be public, but it will be documented for history." Adira stepped forward hesitantly. "My father believed in truth above all else. That's why he preserved the evidence, even knowing what it might cost him." "It cost him everything," Seraph said quietly. "But he saved the one thing that mattered most to him." She looked directly at Adira. "You!" The young ensign's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "He never told me about his work. I didn't understand until I found his message with the storage unit key. He protected you the only way he could," Seraph explained, "by keeping you separate from what he knew." Westlake cleared her throat. "Commander, there's the matter of your status. Your official record shows honorable discharge 7 years ago. Reinstating your commission would require significant administrative maneuvering." "I'm not looking for reinstatement," Seraph replied. "Ghost Squadron died in Damascus. Its mission ended there." "Then what will you do?" Thorndyke asked. "You've spent 7 years living as someone else. Few people have that opportunity to truly start over." Seraph glanced around the command center, thinking of the hangar beyond where she had mopped floors and emptied trash while silently watching, waiting, gathering intelligence on her own terms. "First, I'll finish what we started," she said decisively. "Every person involved in the betrayal of my team will be identified and held accountable, no matter how high up the chain it goes." "And after?" Adira asked softly. Seraph's expression softened slightly. "After, I'll honor my team the best way I know how, by living the life they lost the chance to live, something beyond war and shadows." The base's public address system suddenly activated. "Attention all personnel. Security drill concluded. Return to normal operations." Throughout the hangar and across the base, regular activities resumed. Personnel returned to their stations. Conversations picked up where they had left off. The machinery of military readiness continuing its relentless forward motion. But for Seraph Voss, everything had changed. She was no longer the invisible janitor, moving through spaces unnoticed and unremarked. The weight of her true identity had resurfaced, bringing with it both the burden of past tragedy and the possibility of future purpose. "I should return to my cleaning duties," she said, a hint of irony in her voice, "at least until the official story is determined." "Actually," Thorndyke countered, "I believe your expertise would be valuable in the ongoing investigation. A temporary consulting position with Intelligence Division seems appropriate." "Consulting," Seraph repeated, considering the word. "It has a better ring than janitor, though the uniform is less comfortable." The small joke, the first hint of lightness from her in their entire acquaintance, caught Thorndyke by surprise. He smiled briefly before returning to his professional demeanor. "Captain Westlake will handle the administrative details," he said. "In the meantime, perhaps you'd like to properly brief Ensign Morrow on her father's contribution to Ghost Squadron. I believe she's earned that much." Seraph nodded her agreement. As Thorndyke departed to manage the aftermath of Kierstad and Harrington's detention, she turned to Adira. "Your father was more than just our communications specialist," she began, leading the young ensign toward a quiet corner of the command center. "He was the heart of our team, the one who reminded us what we were fighting for when operations dragged on and objectives became blurred." As Seraph shared stories of Elias Morrow, his brilliance under pressure, his quiet humor during long deployments, his unwavering loyalty to his team, she felt something healing within herself. These were memories she had locked away for 7 years, too painful to revisit alone. Sharing them now with Elias's daughter brought them into the light, transforming them from wounds into honors. Adira listened intently, occasionally offering her own memories of her father, building a more complete picture of the man they had both known in different ways. Later that afternoon, as the official investigation began gathering momentum, Sarah found herself alone in Hangar 7. The space was quieter now, most personnel reassigned to manage the security situation following the high-profile detentions. She stood in the exact spot where Admiral Thorndyke had humiliated her just days earlier, the janitor with a mop, invisible to the powerful figures who passed through her space. How quickly everything had changed. The powerless now held power, the hidden was now seen. Sarah knelt and ran her fingers across the smooth concrete floor, the surface she had cleaned countless times over 7 years. In many ways, this hangar knew her better than any person still living. It had witnessed her patient vigilance, her silent determination, her refusal to abandon her mission even when it meant sacrificing her identity. The sound of approaching footsteps made her rise. Captain Westlake entered, carrying a small package. "Commander," Westlake acknowledged, "I thought you might want this." She handed Seraph the package. Inside was a service-dress blue uniform with commander's insignia, and, beneath it, a small wooden box. Seraph opened the box to find the Ghost Squadron tattoo rendered as an official military insignia, the spectral osprey clutching lightning bolts. "Admiral Thorndyke had it commissioned," Westlake explained. "He believes Ghost Squadron deserves official recognition, even if most of its operations remain classified." Seraph traced the emblem with her fingertip, memories flooding back of the team members who had worn this mark with pride. "Thank you. The formal briefing begins at 0800 tomorrow," Westlake continued. "Your testimony will be crucial in establishing the timeline of events in Damascus." Seraph nodded her understanding. "I'll be ready." As Westlake turned to leave, she paused. "For what it's worth, Commander, your presence here these past 7 years has made a difference. Even when we didn't know who you were, you set a standard of diligence that affected everyone around you. Nothing escapes notice in a place where even the Azim maintenance staff operates with military precision." The observation was unexpectedly perceptive. Seraph had never considered how her approach to janitorial duties might have influenced the operational culture of the base. "Old habits," she replied simply. Left alone once more, Seraph gathered her cleaning supplies for the final time. She would return the cart to the maintenance department, turn in her access badge, and walk away from Seraph Voss, the janitor, forever. As she pushed the cart toward the exit, she passed a group of junior officers entering the hangar. They paused their conversation, looking at her with new awareness. Word had spread quickly. One of them, a young lieutenant she recognized from countless mornings of invisible service, stepped forward awkwardly. "Commander Voss," he said, the title still unfamiliar on his lips. "I wanted to apologize for—" He trailed off, unsure how to articulate the countless small dismissals, the walking through her freshly mopped floors, the trash carelessly dropped beside rather than inside receptacles. Seraph saved him from his discomfort. "No apology necessary, Lieutenant. I was doing my job. You were doing yours." "Still," he insisted, "we should have seen—" "No," Seraph interrupted gently. "You shouldn't have. That was the point." She continued past them, leaving behind both their discomfort and her anonymity. Tomorrow would bring debriefings and depositions, the beginning of a process that would eventually deliver justice for her fallen team. For now, though, there was a simple pleasure in walking upright, in being seen for who she truly was. Outside, the afternoon sun broke through the clouds that had lingered for days. Seraph paused at the base of the hangar steps, turning her face upward to feel the warmth on her skin. For the first time in 7 years, she allowed herself to remember not just how her team had died, but how they had lived, with purpose, with honor, with an unshakable bond that transcended even the betrayal that had ended them. 1 week later, Seraph stood at attention in Admiral Thorndyke's office as he reviewed the preliminary findings of the investigation. The evidence Adira Morrow had provided had opened multiple lines of inquiry, revealing a network of corruption that extended beyond Kierstead and Harrington, to include 3 senior Pentagon officials and a deputy director of intelligence. "The investigation will continue for months, possibly years," Thorndyke explained, setting aside the report. "But the immediate threat has been contained. All principals identified thus far have been detained or placed under surveillance." "And Ghost Squadron?" Seraph asked. "Will the truth be acknowledged?" Thorndyke's expression was solemn but satisfied. "A formal recognition ceremony is being arranged, private given the classified nature of the operations, but with full military honors for your fallen team members. Their families will receive proper notification of the circumstances, along with appropriate commendations. Seraph absorbed this news silently. No ceremony could bring back her team, but acknowledgement of their sacrifice mattered, not just for their memory, but for the principle that no operator should ever be abandoned by the chain of command. "There's one more thing," Thorndyke added, reaching into his desk drawer. He produced a small velvet box. "The Secretary of the Navy authorized this personally." Inside the box was a Navy Cross, the second highest decoration awarded for valor in combat. "For extraordinary heroism in Damascus," Thorndyke explained, "and for 7 years of continued service in the face of betrayal by those you were sworn to trust." Seraph looked at the medal without reaching for it. "I don't want recognition, Admiral. I want accountability." "You'll have both," Thorndyke assured her. "The medal isn't just for you, it's for the historical record. Proof that the Navy ultimately stood by its own, even if it took 7 years to make it right." Put that way, Seraph could accept it, not as personal validation, but as institutional acknowledgement of both failure and correction. "What will you do now, Commander?" Thorndyke asked, as she finally took the box. Seraph considered the question carefully. For 7 years, her entire existence had been defined by a single purpose: uncovering the truth of Damascus and bringing those responsible to justice. With that mission now in motion, what remained? "I've received several offers," she admitted. "Private security consulting, intelligence analysis, even a teaching position at Quantico." "All worthy pursuits," Thorndyke nodded. "You have unique expertise that would benefit any of those fields." "True," Seraph acknowledged, "but I find myself drawn to something else entirely." She moved to the window, looking out over the base she had cleaned and maintained for 7 years. From this vantage point, she could see Hangar 7, where her journey had both ended and begun anew. "During my time as maintenance staff, I observed operations from a perspective few ever experience," she explained. "I saw how the smallest details affect overall readiness, how overlooked personnel contribute to mission success in ways that never appear in after-action reports." Thorndyke joined her at the window, following her gaze. "You're considering staying in a support role?" "Not exactly," Seraph clarified. "I'm thinking of establishing a new training program, one that teaches operators how to see what's typically invisible to them: the infrastructure, the personnel, the details that can mean the difference between mission success and failure. Situational awareness beyond the battlefield," Thorndyke mused, intrigued. "Teaching special operators to truly see the environments they move through, even when they think they're safe." "Exactly," Seraph confirmed. "Ghost Squadron was betrayed because we followed protocols and trusted the system. The next generation of operators needs to understand that vigilance doesn't end when they return to base." Thorndyke considered the proposal thoughtfully. It would require significant institutional support: curriculum development, security clearances, integration with existing training pipelines. "I have time," Seraph replied simply, "and first-hand experience few instructors could match." The Admiral nodded, decision made. "Draft a formal proposal. I'll ensure it reaches the appropriate authorities with my personal endorsement." As their meeting concluded, Thorndyke extended his hand. "For what it's worth, Commander, I believe your team would be proud of what you've accomplished." Seraph accepted the handshake, her grip firm. "They deserve better than what happened in Damascus. Making sure it never happens again is the best tribute I can offer." She departed Thorndyke's office and walked through the administrative wing, no longer in Janitor's coveralls, but in the service dress blues of a naval commander. Personnel she passed acknowledged her with nods of respect, some still adjusting to the transformation from maintenance worker to decorated special operations officer. Outside, she found Ensign Adira Morrow waiting near the parade ground, watching junior officers conduct drill practice. "Commander," Adira greeted her, still growing accustomed to using the title. "Ensign," Seraph returned. "How are you finding your new assignment?" Following the revelation of Kierstead and Harrington's betrayal, Adira had been reassigned to intelligence analysis, where her attention to detail and pattern recognition skills had immediately proven valuable. "Challenging," Adira admitted, "but fulfilling. I feel like I'm continuing my father's work in some small way." "He would be proud," Seraph assured her. "Not just of your accomplishments, but of your courage in coming forward with his evidence." They walked together across the parade ground, passing the flagpole where colors would soon be lowered for the evening. The base hummed with the rhythms of military precision, rhythms Seraph had observed for years from the margins but now participated in directly. "Will you be at the memorial service next week?" Adira asked. "Yes," Seraph confirmed. "All surviving family members of Ghost Squadron have been invited. It will be my first time meeting many of them." "Are you nervous?" Adira asked perceptively. Seraph considered the question. "Not nervous, but aware of the weight of responsibility. I survived when they didn't. I carry their stories, their last moments." "That's a heavy burden," Adira observed. "It is," Seraph agreed. "But it's also a privilege. Someone needs to remember them as they truly were. Not just names on a memorial wall, but people who lived with extraordinary courage and died with undeserved betrayal." They reached the edge of the parade ground, where their paths would diverge. Adira to the communications center for evening duty, Seraph to her temporary quarters in officers' housing. "Commander," Adira said hesitantly, "my father left a personal message for you with the evidence. I wasn't sure when to give it to you." She produced a sealed envelope, yellowed slightly with age. "He said you should read it when Damascus was finally put to rest." Seraph accepted the envelope carefully, recognizing Elias Morrow's handwriting on the front, simply Seraph, with no rank or last name. "Thank you," she said quietly. "This means more than you know." After Adira departed, Seraph continued to her quarters, the envelope a tangible weight in her pocket. Inside her room, spacious and well-appointed compared to the modest apartment she had occupied as maintenance staff, she sat at the small desk by the window. The sun was setting over the base, casting long shadows across buildings she had cleaned and maintained for 7 years, from janitor to commander in the space of a week, a transformation as abrupt as it was overdue. She opened Elias Morrow's envelope carefully, unfolding the single page inside. "Seraph," the letter began, "if you're reading this, you've finished what we started. I always knew if anyone could survive Damascus and bring the truth to light, it would be you. Your strength wasn't just in combat skills or tactical brilliance, but in your unflinching commitment to what's right, no matter the personal cost. The others died believing we were abandoned by mistake, communications failure, mechanical issues, the fog of war. I couldn't bring myself to tell them what I discovered in those final hours, that the extraction cancellation came directly from our own command, that we were sacrificed deliberately to protect political interests and corrupt dealings. I'm leaving this evidence for whoever survives, but I write these personal words for you specifically because I know the weight you'll carry. Don't let it consume you. Justice matters, but so does living. The best revenge against those who betrayed us is to build something meaningful from the ashes they created. The team is gone, but what we stood for remains. Honor that by finding purpose beyond vengeance, joy beyond justice. That's my final order as your communications specialist and your friend. Until Valhalla, Elias." Seraph folded the letter carefully, returning it to its envelope. Elias had known her well, known that she would need permission to move beyond the mission of justice to find something more. She moved to the window, watching as colors were lowered for the evening, personnel standing at attention across the base as the flag made its ceremonial descent. For 7 years, she had watched this daily ritual while pushing a cleaning cart or carrying trash bags, invisible to those who performed and observed the ceremony. Now she stood as herself, Commander Seraph Voss, sole survivor of Ghost Squadron, bearer of both burden and privilege. The weight of the past remained, but alongside it grew something new. Possibility. The chance to transform tragedy into purpose, betrayal into protection for those who would follow. Tomorrow would bring more debriefings, more testimonies, more steps toward justice for her fallen team. But tonight, for the first time in 7 years, Seraph allowed herself to look forward rather than back, to consider not just what had been lost, but what might yet be built. Outside her window, the base settled into evening routine. Security lights activated, personnel changed shifts. The ceaseless machinery of military readiness continued its forward motion. And within that machinery, visible now rather than hidden, Seraph Voss found her place, not as a ghost seeking vengeance, but as a guardian ensuring that what happened to her team would never happen again. She touched the Ghost Squadron emblem on her uniform, feeling the raised edges of the spectral osprey that had once been inked on her wrist and was now displayed with honor. Some battles were fought in the field with weapons and tactics. Others were fought every day with vigilance and memory, and the quiet determination to protect those who served. Both were worthy, both were necessary, and both, at last, were hers to pursue in the light rather than the shadows.